So now that we understand the basic workflow of PlayMaker, I do want to point out that there are some great tutorials and reference material um, from the developers of PlayMaker. There's great online documentation and some video tutorials. We're going to use PlayMaker for the rest of the semester, and we'll focus on some very specific projects. I do want to point out a couple of things that at any time, if you find yourself in a situation where you're wondering what an action or a component is, just like in the default version of Unity, if you're looking at a specific action, let's say, and you're trying to understand what exactly is happening here, if you go down to the definition of the action, or if you have the action applied in a state machine, you can always click on this little book that's just to the right of this little cog here with the question mark, and that'll take you out to the live documentation from the developer's website. So this is a great resource. I find myself constantly looking at this when I'm browsing through different actions or different events and trying to wrap my head around what the difference between a get key up and a get key down, or a get button this, or a collision event versus a listen for collision, and it can be really helpful. In addition to that, there are some tips that are built in too, and a lot of times if you roll your mouse over, it'll give you a real quick tip about what kind of parameter this is or what kind of variable it's looking for. So it's a really intuitive environment once you understand the basic concepts of events that you're establishing, or if you're choosing from predefined system events, and the different states that you're building and what those states are doing, what kind of actions that they're performing. Now, when it comes to all of these actions, they can be overwhelming because each one of these are a category, and they're very intuitive when you start understanding what action is found inside what category. They're organized very well, but in some cases, as we get deeper into this, you might not know if you're using, want a logic event or a math event, or if you want a game object, actions. And there's a little search field up here, and a lot of times, if I determine that I want to, set something to rotate, well, what I'll do is I'll just go up to this little action field here, or a little search field, and type in rotate, and it'll tell me all of the things that reference rotate in the title. And you can see here that in the transform category, there's a rotate. In the vector 3, there's reference of a rotate. And so it can really narrow down your search very quickly. So keep that in mind, that if you remember that you're looking for some kind of key input, you can type in key, and then you can see here that under player prefs there's some key reference, and under input there are some key references as well. So just know that search function is very handy. I inadvertently added an action to my state, and so I'll clear that up simply by clicking on this action preference, or this action setting here with this little cog, and choose to remove action. That'll pull that action out of the equation. Now, for the first project that we're working on, we're going to work on this greeting card project, this greeting card game. And the idea is that we're going to develop a game that we'll send to a friend or an audience, and then upon completing or being successful in that game, they'll be rewarded with some kind of simple payoff, which is a greeting message. And we're going to model this after an infinite runner style game. And I have a link open up here. I'll post this link in Blackboard, but it's basically just an overview of lots of different endless runners. And some of the more popular ones are Jetpack Joyride and Temple Run. If you have a mobile device and want to give these a test drive, I'd encourage you to do that. If you don't have a mobile device or a tablet, you can also go to YouTube and just type in some of the names of these and watch the trailer to see how they function if you're not familiar with endless runner style games. So there's a long list of these. Some of these you may recognize, some of them may not. If I scroll down here, you'll see that there's a lot of these are actually by the same company. There's Zombie Tsunami and Monster Dash. Monster Dash is by the same company. In fact, you can start to see some of these company names listed here. They'll start to repeat themselves. So there's a long list of these that are very popular. All of these have a different variety of kind of gameplay. And so it's really important. I want to stress the importance that when it comes to getting started in really any kind of project, but specifically with game design, it's really important to start off with a rough concept on paper before you get lost in the button pushing stuff. And it's really important that we keep a production log here. And I'd recommend just having a notebook next to you that you can keep notes on either bugs that need to be squashed or problems that need to be solved. And so before we get started here, I just want to give you a real quick overview. I'm just going to do a real quick sketch of what the basic wireframe functionality of our game is going to be. So I'm starting off with a ground plane here. This will be our ground. And we're going to have our player object. Now we're going to start to depart. Once we get the basic nuts and bolts of this down, we're going to depart from this basic wireframe that we've created, but we'll all start by creating the same basic wireframe. The player has the ability to move up and down, and we'll use that basic thrust mechanic. So thrust will send our player up into the air, and by releasing the thrust, gravity will pull our player back down to the ground. During gameplay, we're going to have these obstacles, and just to kind of get things moving, we'll have obstacles, and they will be moving towards the direction of the player. So we can kind of have this background element. We can have some background graphics that move as well, and it will give the impression that the player is actually moving. Now later on, we might determine that we actually want a fixed environment and that our player should move through that environment. But for our first prototype, our first wireframe, we're actually going to move everything in the background, all the other assets, and keep the player basically still while allowing it to move up and down. So basically our camera is going to be fixed, and our camera will be focused on the play area, and we'll move all of the elements except the player and except the ground plane. Now there'll be obstacles moving, and we'll want to avoid the obstacles because if they hit us, they're going to damage our health. Okay, but in addition to that, we're going to have some kind of element that we want to collect. So we'll start off with some basic coins, okay, and we'll introduce some coins into the equation, and those will be kind of moving around in various. They'll be spawning at different places and create these rows of coins that we can collect that will either earn points, will reward our health by allowing us to pick up items and add back to our health. And once we get the basic wireframe here, we want to establish the basic mechanics of the player moving up and down, objects spawning in our environment dynamically and moving, so we have to avoid them. We'll have some basic elements that we want to pick up and collect. So basically we have the bad stuff and we have the good stuff. Okay, we want to avoid the bad stuff. We want to collect the good stuff. Okay, and good stuff could include things like coins, where we earn points. So this will add to our points. And then we might have other things like, we can find some kind of health, that as we lose health, we can pick up these health packs, and this will take our health and add to it. So the idea is that we're trying to avoid these obstacles, collect the good stuff while avoiding the bad stuff. That's our basic wireframe. Once we get that functionality and those mechanics pinned down, then we can start to depart and say, okay, well, now I really want to think about the gameplay. I want to figure out how this game is going to function. I really want to focus on this notion of the good stuff and the bad stuff. And maybe we can include some kind of power up and really start to focus on the theme and reinforce that with the mechanics of our gameplay. And if you look back at the link that I've posted in Blackboard, all of these endless runner style games are doing essentially the same thing. They're moving through space, getting the good stuff and avoiding the bad stuff. That's what all of these games have in common. Now, all the other mechanics, is there a timed element? Is there, an upgrade element? Is there a level element that we're trying to progress through? All of those elements are up to you as the designer to figure out what's going to make the most compelling gameplay. So we'll get started with our basic wireframe game in the next presentation, and we'll use PlayMaker to build up all those concepts. Once we get those wireframes established, then we'll depart from our basic concept, but it is key that we have a living document. We'll start off with a really simple sketch, and then we'll move into something that's much more refined, much more contains much more information, and is much more compelling in terms of a game design proposal or production document. We'll catch up in the next presentation.